I make no apologies for my game throughout my career. The only respect and admiration I need is of the 12 teammates on our ball club. And as long as they're all for me and I'm all for them and I have their respect, that's all that matters. And whatever the general public thinks about my style of play, I really could care less.
And now we've got Laimbeer and a all-out slugfest.
Oh, Harris Field, Laimbeer. It's over.
In the history of the NBA, no villain was more unapologetic than Bill Laimbeer. He didn't just play the game, he corrupted it, twisted it, turned it into psychological warfare, and whether you hated him or respected him, you never forgot him. Because Laimbeer wasn't trying to be liked, he was trying to break you. At the heart of the bad boy Pistons, that snarling, brawling dynasty of the late 80s, Laimbeer was the anchor, the face of everything beautiful and brutal about Detroit basketball. While Isaiah ran the offense and Rodman chased rebounds like a man possessed, Laimbeer did the dirty work. He set bone-cracking screens. He threw cold elbows. He baited stars into losing their cool. And when a fight broke out, odds are, he started it. The Pistons weren't just tough, they were theatrical. They relished the booze. They weaponized intimidation. Other teams had athletes. Detroit had bruisers, and no one bruised harder or smarter than Laimbeer. He studied opponents like a boxer before a title bout. He knew what rattled them, who cried to refs, who got thrown off rhythm. And once he found your weak spot, he hit it again and again. But this wasn't aimless rage. Laimbeer's hate was targeted. Over the years, there were certain players who got under his skin, not because they were weak, but because they threatened his empire. Rivals who pushed back, superstars who refused to fold. Some clowned him, some dunked on him, some fought him, and all of them earned a place on his personal hit list. These weren't just opponents, they were enemies. And in this video, we're diving deep into the 7 players Bill Laimbeer hated the most. From Celtics legends to Chicago Kings to Showtime royalty, this is a blood-soaked tour through one of the most savage eras in basketball. This isn't a highlight reel, it's a battlefield. Let's start with the man who embodied everything Laimbeer despised and everything he couldn't control. But before proceeding, please take a second and subscribe and like this video. It will be very motivation for us. Larry Bird and Bill Laimbeer never liked each other. That much isn't speculation, it's historical fact. Their rivalry wasn't one of admiration wrapped in competition. It was cold, physical, and built on real contempt. And for Laimbeer, Bird wasn't just another superstar to slow down. He was the face of the Eastern Conference dynasty the Pistons were built to destroy. By 1987, the Celtics had been to 4 finals in the last 6 seasons. Bird was already a 3-time MVP. His shot was deadly, his passes were genius, and his trash talk was legendary. But what made him such a target for Laimbeer wasn't just his skill, it was that Bird didn't flinch. He welcomed the physicality, and he never, ever let Detroit bully him. The two collided hardest during the 1987 Eastern Conference Finals. 7 games of elbows, ejections, and everything short of open warfare. Game 3 in Detroit was the boiling point. Bird went up for a rebound. Laimbeer pulled him down with a sharp, unnecessary foul. Bird popped up and immediately hurled the ball at Laimbeer's head. Fists flew. Both men were ejected. It wasn't a scuffle, it was a statement. That moment told you everything about their relationship. It was fueled by contact, confrontation, and an utter lack of respect. Laimbeer's entire approach to basketball was about control, using physicality, timing, and irritation to unravel his opponent. But Bird was one of the few who could take that abuse and still torch you for 30 points. He didn't retaliate with fouls. He retaliated by picking apart defenses and letting Laimbeer know about it every possession. One former teammate said, Bird would tell you exactly what he was going to do, and then do it, even if you were holding his jersey the whole time. Game 5 of that same series offered a defining moment. With just seconds left, the Pistons had a 107-106 lead. Isaiah Thomas tried to inbound the ball under his own basket. Bird read it, stole the pass clean, and dished it to Dennis Johnson for the game-winning layup. Laimbeer was on the floor, helpless, watching his chance to swing the series disappear. Bird didn't celebrate wildly. He just pointed to his temple and ran back down the court. It wasn't just brilliance. It was the kind of mental edge that burned even more than the loss itself. From Laimbeer's point of view, Bird was everything the Pistons were fighting against. The league darling, the protected icon, the one who got the calls. But to his frustration, Bird was also tougher than most gave him credit for. He came from a working-class Indiana background, played through back pain that would have sidelined others, and never backed down from a fight, even if it meant getting ejected. Bird, for his part, didn't mince words about Laimbeer. He once told a reporter, "We all hated Laimbeer. He was a dirty player, plain and simple." In another interview, he remarked that Laimbeer didn't care if he hurt you or not. Those weren't playful jabs. They were indictments. Bird didn't respect how Laimbeer played and made that public. And that was the essence of their feud. There was no mutual admiration beneath the surface. No post-career reconnections, just lingering dislike. When Bird retired and was asked if he'd ever bury the hatchet with Laimbeer, his response was direct, not a chance. Their games together were loaded with tension. There were dozens of hard fouls, constant jawing, and a palpable sense that either man might snap at any moment. But what Laimbeer hated most wasn't just Bird's confidence, it was his success. In the era before Detroit finally broke through, Bird was the final boss they couldn't defeat. His Celtics bounced the Pistons out of the playoffs in '85 and again in '87. Every time they got close, Bird slammed the door shut. Even after Laimbeer and the Pistons got their revenge in the late '80s, the sting of those earlier losses lingered. Bird had made them earn everything, and had done it while standing his ground, unafraid. Bill Laimbeer didn't respect finesse. He respected toughness. And yet, the toughest opponent he ever had was a guy who barely talked, shot from impossible angles, and took every hit without blinking. That's what made Larry Bird so dangerous. And that's what made him, in Laimbeer's eyes, utterly infuriating. If there was ever a player Bill Laimbeer couldn't intimidate, couldn't rattle, couldn't wear down, it was Michael Jordan, and that's exactly why he hated him. Jordan entered the league in 1984 with more hype than any player since Magic or Bird, but to Laimbeer and the bad boy Pistons, hype meant nothing. They didn't respect flash, they respected scars, bruises, and playoff wins, and Jordan had none of those, yet. But it didn't take long for the tension to build. By the late 1980s, the Bulls were climbing fast, and Jordan was becoming a problem, a real one. He was dropping 35 a night, soaring over double teams, and dragging Chicago deeper into the playoffs with each passing year. And Laimbeer, he was the gatekeeper, the last line of defense in a Pistons system built for one purpose: to stop that man. So they created the Jordan rules. It wasn't a theory, it was a strategy, a brutal, targeted defensive blueprint, and Laimbeer was at the center of it. The rules were simple: no free runs to the basket, hit him when he comes off a screen, make him feel every single possession. Chuck Daly, the Pistons head coach, described it as a way of making him think twice. But Laimbeer didn't want Jordan thinking twice. He wanted him broken, on the ground, frustrated, disrupted. The two teams faced off in the playoffs 4 consecutive years, from 1988 to 1991. And for the first 3 of those, Detroit sent Chicago home. The collisions were brutal. Laimbeer clotheslined Jordan more than once. There's one game, Game 4 of the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals, where Laimbeer fouled out trying to slow him down. Jordan dropped 42 that night. It didn't matter who rotated over. The man was untouchable. But Laimbeer never stopped swinging. Jordan never forgot. He called the Pistons thugs in the press, said they had no class after Detroit walked off the court in 1991 without shaking hands, a move Laimbeer reportedly orchestrated. When asked years later why they left early, Laimbeer doubled down. They whined for years. We weren't about to congratulate them. And that wasn't bravado. That was contempt. Laimbeer despised Jordan's elevation in the league, the way media anointed him, protected him. In his mind, Jordan got all the calls. He saw the whistles go the other way. And worse, he saw the NBA bend to make room for Jordan's story. Laimbeer once told reporters that the league wants Chicago to win. It's better for business. Behind the scenes, it was even uglier. Teammates say Laimbeer would single out Jordan during film sessions, rewinding plays to mock his reactions. If Jordan flinched after a hard foul, Laimbeer would grin. If Jordan stared back, Laimbeer stared harder. The mental warfare was constant. He wasn't just trying to stop Jordan, he was trying to unmake him. But he couldn't. Jordan kept coming, kept scoring, kept rising. By 1991, it was over. The Bulls swept the Pistons in 4 brutal games, with Jordan soaring higher than ever, emotionally and physically. The feeling was mutual. Laimbeer never softened on Jordan, even in retirement. He rarely praised him, even as the rest of the league bowed. If anything, he saw Jordan's rise as the death of the bad boys era. The league changed the rules, enforced hand-checking, protected shooters. It was a new NBA, Jordan's NBA, and Laimbeer never fit in. He didn't want to. That's what made the hate so pure. It wasn't jealousy, it wasn't bitterness, it was philosophical. Laimbeer built his game on punishment. Jordan built his game on brilliance. One tried to break you, the other made you irrelevant. And in the end, Jordan won. But to Laimbeer, that war, the elbows, the rules, the bruises, was always worth it. Because if he couldn't beat Jordan with finesse, he'd beat him with defiance. And for a few years, he almost did.
Win championships. That's all that really mattered to us. Our style of play was, everybody called it ugly and they called it ruining the game. But reality says that we changed the game.
If Michael Jordan was the fire that scorched the Pistons, then Scottie Pippen was the wind that made the flames uncontrollable. To Bill Laimbeer, Jordan might have been the face of the Bulls, but it was Pippen who made them unstoppable, and that made him even harder to stomach. Their rivalry didn't start with fists. It started with frustration. By the late 80s, Laimbeer's Pistons had perfected the art of breaking superstars. Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins, even Magic. They all had to fight for every inch. But Pippen, he was different, quieter, smoother. He didn't bark, he didn't posture, he just played. And over time, that made him dangerous. The early version of Scottie, the 1988-1989 version, Laimbeer didn't take seriously. He was skinny, deferential, unsure of his role, and the Pistons zeroed in on that. They punished him. In the 1989 Eastern Conference Finals, Pippen famously suffered a migraine in Game 7, scoring just 2 points. Detroit fans mocked him. Laimbeer, he all but called him soft. In interviews afterward, Laimbeer refused to give Pippen credit, brushing him off like a role player, and for a while, it worked. Jordan was forced to carry the Bulls by himself. Jordan rules worked because Pippen wasn't ready, but that window didn't last long. By 1990, Pippen was a different player. He was defending the opponent's best scorer, running the break like a point guard, attacking the rim with length and precision. And Laimbeer noticed, not with respect, but with contempt, because Pippen's rise meant the Bulls were no longer a one-man team. Now they had a second superstar who didn't flinch when the elbows came. The 1990 ECF went to 7 brutal games, and while Jordan was the engine, Pippen was the stabilizer, the swingman who couldn't be rattled. Laimbeer tried everything: hard fouls, post-up abuse, even subtle shots after the whistle. Pippen just stared back, unfazed. He was still skinny, still quiet, but the softness, that was gone. And that's when Laimbeer's frustration turned to hatred. The 1991 Eastern Conference Finals were the final blow. The Bulls didn't just beat the Pistons, they annihilated them. 4 games, a sweep, and Pippen was the one doing damage on both ends. He guarded Isaiah Thomas, harassed Joe Dumars, and blew past Laimbeer in transition. In Game 4, with the Bulls up big, Pippen dunked over Laimbeer, hard, no celebration, just a stare, a statement. That was personal. And when the final buzzer sounded, Laimbeer didn't stick around. He turned and walked, past the Bulls bench, past the media, straight to the tunnel, with Isaiah, Edwards, and a few others in tow. But Pippen didn't let it slide. That's just who they were, he later said. Bad sportsmanship. No class. Laimbeer, for his part, stood firm. When asked years later why they left early, he said, "We didn't like them, and they didn't like us. Why fake it?" But it went deeper than that. What Laimbeer saw in Pippen wasn't just an opponent, it was a shift. The game was evolving. Long, skilled wings like Pippen were taking over. Guys who didn't play with rage, but with control. And Laimbeer hated it, because it made his brand of basketball obsolete. Pippen didn't need to foul to get in your head. He'd pick you clean, run the floor, and finish at the rim. And when he did talk, it was surgical, not emotional. He once told reporters, "We just played better basketball. They were bullies, we beat the bullies." And for Laimbeer, there was no worse insult, because his whole identity, his legacy, was built on bullying the league, making stars look human, breaking them down. But he couldn't break Scottie. Even worse, Scottie never respected him back. Pippen has rarely spoken about Laimbeer in interviews, and when he does, it's dismissive. No fear, no grudging praise, just quiet disdain. In one sit-down, he said plainly, "We didn't care about their style. We knew they couldn't keep up with us." To Laimbeer, that silence was worse than trash talk. It was erasure. In the years since, the two have never reconciled. No handshake, no nostalgia, just mutual frost. And even today, when fans bring up the Bad Boys vs. Bulls saga, it's Pippen, not Jordan, who seems to linger in Laimbeer's memory. The man who didn't talk back, didn't play dirty, and still dismantled his team. Scottie Pippen didn't beat Laimbeer with brute force. He beat him by outlasting him, and to a man like Bill Laimbeer, that might have stung the most. When it came to front-court battles in the 1980s, Bill Laimbeer thrived in the mud. He didn't out-jump you. He didn't out-muscle you. He dragged you into the trenches. Elbows high, forearms ready, mind games always ticking. But with Robert Parrish, none of that worked. Parrish didn't flinch, didn't talk, didn't react. And that's what drove Laimbeer insane. Robert Parrish was the backbone of the Boston Celtics, stoic, towering, and unbothered. They called him the Chief, and he earned it, not just for his calm demeanor, but for his presence. He wasn't the loudest Celtic, that was Bird. He wasn't the flashiest, that was McHale, but he was the anchor. And when the Pistons rose in the East, it was Parrish who stood between Laimbeer and dominance. Their clashes weren't highlight reels, they were slow burns, post-ups that turned into shoving matches, rebounds that ended with bodies on the floor, screens that doubled as collisions. Laimbeer pushed, Parrish absorbed, Laimbeer smirked, Parrish stared, and through it all, the hate simmered beneath the surface. But in 1987, the fire boiled over. Game 5. Eastern Conference Finals, Celtics versus Pistons at Boston Garden. The series was tied 2-2. The tension was brutal. Every possession felt like war. And then it happened. The incident that would define the Laimbeer-Parrish feud forever. Midway through the second half, Laimbeer did what he always did. Shoved, leaned, disrupted. Parrish, known for his calm, snapped. Without warning, he turned and unloaded a flurry of punches to Laimbeer's head. No hesitation, no words, just fists. 3 clean hits to the side of the face, and the refs, they missed it entirely. Laimbeer stumbled backward, stunned. The crowd erupted. CBS commentators couldn't believe what they were seeing. Parrish, the quiet one, had exploded, but there was no whistle, no ejection, just a stunned Laimbeer left to stew. The NBA suspended Parrish for Game 6 retroactively, but in the moment, Laimbeer had to eat it. And for a man who built his reputation on psychological warfare, that loss of control, that moment of public humiliation, cut deep. He never forgot it. Laimbeer and Parrish were fundamentally different. One wore the black hat proudly. The other didn't play the game. Laimbeer thrived on reactions. He baited superstars, drew texts, forced meltdowns. Parrish never gave him the satisfaction until that night, and after it, Laimbeer knew he'd been cracked. The rest of the series was a war. Game 5 ended with Bird stealing the inbounds pass and Dennis Johnson laying in the game winner. Game 6 saw Parrish suspended. Game 7 saw the Celtics survive. But the subplot, the undercurrent, was always Laimbeer versus Parrish, rage versus restraint, the agitator versus the giant who refused to play along. Over the years, Laimbeer made no secret of how he felt about Boston. He said once, "They didn't respect us. We didn't like them. And we made sure they felt it every time."
The one that came out first, and there's always a leprechaun out on the floor. I'd go out and spit right on the leprechaun, rub my foot in it, and then go down and make a big dunk. Away we went.
But there was something about Parrish that cut differently. Bird was loud, McHale was scrappy. But Parrish, he hurt Laimbeer without saying a word. And in a league full of personalities, that silence stung. The funny thing, Parrish didn't seem to hate Laimbeer back, not openly. In interviews years later, he spoke with a shrug. He played dirty, he said once, but that's who he was. No anger, just acknowledgement.
I played against some really, really top talent. And Kareem, hands down. He's the only player I played against, Cedric. There's nothing I could do to alter, change, redirect him. Nothing I could do. I just hope, he wasn't hot. Because if he was hot, it's going to be a long night. Because he's going to get it 2025.
For Parrish, Laimbeer was a chapter in the story. For Laimbeer, Parrish was the opponent he never truly solved. Even in the bad boy Pistons' finest hour, 1989 and 1990, Laimbeer never got a chance to erase that memory. The Celtics declined, Parrish aged, the rivalry faded, but the grudge didn't. And maybe that's what made it so personal. Laimbeer could get under your skin. That was his gift. But Parrish didn't give him the satisfaction, not until he snapped. And when he did, the whole world saw it. 3 punches, no whistle, just silence. That silence, to a man like Bill Laimbeer, was deafening. If there was one player in the league who could match Bill Laimbeer's physicality, volume, and sheer force of personality, it was Charles Barkley, and that's exactly what made them enemies. On the court, they were opposites in style but identical in spirit. Laimbeer played like a villain in a Shakespeare play, cold, deliberate, and always 2 steps ahead in the mind games. Barkley was chaos incarnate, undersized, explosive, and unfiltered. But what really sparked the fire between them wasn't just physical play, it was Barkley's refusal to be intimidated. Their rivalry didn't come out of one moment. It built over years of bruising Eastern Conference matchups in the late 1980s, when Barkley's 76ers were trying to claw their way back to the top, and the Pistons were turning into the bad boys juggernaut. And in those battles, things got heated. Fast. In regular season games between 1987 and 1990, Barkley and Laimbeer clashed repeatedly under the glass. Rebounds weren't just stats, they were declarations of dominance. Barkley, despite standing only 6 feet 6 inches, routinely led the league in rebounding. Laimbeer took that personally. Every time Barkley muscled past him for a board, it chipped away at Detroit's aura of control. And every time Laimbeer tried to bait Barkley with hard fouls or cheap contact, Barkley fired right back. In one memorable game from the 1989 season, Barkley scored 37 points and grabbed 21 rebounds in a win over the Pistons. Laimbeer fouled out. Barkley didn't say much afterward, but the look on his face said everything. He'd gone to war with the bad boys and won. The media loved to stir the pot. Barkley once joked, that you needed more than an ice pack after facing Detroit. Years later, he said in an interview, Bill Laimbeer was the king of cheap shots. The king. I didn't respect the way he played. That sentiment wasn't unique. Plenty of players said similar things about Laimbeer, but coming from Barkley, it cut deeper, because Barkley didn't just talk, he fought back. From Laimbeer's point of view, Barkley represented the one thing the bad boys couldn't neutralize: unpredictability. You could strategize for Jordan. You could bully finesse teams like the Hawks. But Barkley was wild. You couldn't script him. He didn't fold under pressure. He didn't mind confrontation. And he could embarrass you on the scoreboard while laughing in your face. Laimbeer, who prided himself on controlling tempo and energy, hated that. Observers have long pointed to how Barkley seemed to enjoy the chaos. He'd initiate contact, throw elbows, snatch rebounds with one arm while holding Laimbeer off with the other. He mocked Laimbeer's flopping. He stared down Rodman. He jawed at Isaiah. There was no reverence, no fear, just challenge. The Sixers never got past the Pistons in the playoffs, but Barkley's personal performances were never in question. In their 1990 season series, Barkley averaged nearly 30 points per game and was a constant force. Detroit's scheme was designed to wear down stars, but Barkley never faded. He got under Laimbeer's skin in a way very few did. Laimbeer never said much publicly about Barkley, and that silence was telling. With Bird or Jordan, he'd talk about the strategy, the challenge, even grudging respect. But with Barkley, there was just tension. No quotes, no insight, just pure competitive disdain. There was also that infamous story Laimbeer once told years later, half joking, about how Barkley was the only player who ever made him feel like a hockey enforcer, like he needed backup just to deal with him. And knowing Laimbeer, that wasn't an exaggeration. Barkley's blend of force and charisma overwhelmed most defenders, but it also frustrated players like Laimbeer, who felt the game should be dictated by control and discipline, not brute force and spectacle. To be clear, this wasn't a rivalry built on mutual admiration. There was no handshake after games, no summer workouts, no hidden friendship. Barkley didn't respect Laimbeer's style, and Laimbeer resented Barkley's defiance. The way he laughed through contact, dominated the glass, and dismantled Detroit's identity without blinking. By the early 90s, Barkley was on his way to Phoenix, and Laimbeer was inching toward retirement. But even years later, the bad blood lingered. When asked on Inside the NBA about the toughest players he ever faced, Barkley refused to give Laimbeer credit. He fouled hard. That's all, he said. He didn't want to play basketball. He wanted to start fights. That, right there, was the heart of it. Charles Barkley saw basketball as a battle, but one fought fair. Laimbeer saw it as war, and all's fair in war. Two philosophies, two warriors, one long-standing grudge. In the NBA of the 1980s, few players carried themselves with more dignity, intelligence, and history than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was a six-time MVP, an all-time leading scorer, and the creator of basketball's most graceful weapon, the skyhook. Opponents didn't just play against Kareem, they encountered a legacy. And then there was Bill Laimbeer, who made it his mission to dismantle every legacy he faced. The battles between Laimbeer and Kareem weren't built on headline-grabbing brawls or quote-worthy insults. They were built on friction, professional, philosophical, and deeply personal. One man was the face of NBA royalty. The other was the face of its rebellion. When the Detroit Pistons met the Lakers, you could feel the tension between these two titans. Laimbeer didn't try to outscore Kareem. He tried to break his rhythm, frustrate him, chip away at the control that Kareem usually imposed on games. While Kareem operated with precision, Laimbeer operated with chaos. Kareem once said plainly, "I didn't respect the way Bill Laimbeer played. He was dirty. He tried to hurt people." That quote didn't come in the heat of the moment. It came years later, after the dust had settled, and it still carried bitterness. Their rivalry came to a head in the 1988 NBA Finals. Pistons versus Lakers, a 7-game slugfest filled with drama, injuries, and controversy. In Game 6, with Detroit up 3-2 and seconds left on the clock, Laimbeer was whistled for a foul on Kareem's skyhook attempt. It was a soft call, one that still gets debated to this day. Some fans call it the phantom foul. Many believe Laimbeer never even touched him, but the whistle blew. Kareem went to the line, and like the Hall of Famer he was, he buried both free throws. Lakers won the game by a single point and forced Game 7. The Pistons were stunned. To Laimbeer, that whistle symbolized everything he hated about Kareem's stature in the league, that he got calls others didn't, that the game tilted in his favor just because of who he was. He never said it outright, but his body language, the way he glared after the whistle, the way he refused to shake hands, said enough. And if that wasn't enough fuel, the very next year, 1989, Detroit got their revenge. They met the Lakers again in the finals, and this time, there was no phantom foul, no late-game heartbreak. The Pistons swept them 4-0. It was Kareem's final NBA series. There was no fanfare between the two big men, no moment of reconciliation, no quotes of respect. Laimbeer had helped send off one of the greatest to ever play, and he didn't blink. What made their rivalry even more charged was how deeply their styles contrasted. Kareem was a thinker, disciplined professional who saw basketball as an art form. Laimbeer was a provocateur, a psychological operator who turned games into confrontations. He didn't just play against you, he played inside your mind. For Kareem, that approach was repulsive. For Laimbeer, it was necessary. They weren't meant to coexist. That was the truth of it. Their versions of the game clashed on every level. One was revered, the other reviled, and neither cared to bridge that gap. Kareem's disdain wasn't isolated. Many around the league shared it. But coming from a man known for his measured words, his criticism of Laimbeer carried extra weight. And maybe that's exactly what bothered Laimbeer most, because no matter how many games Detroit won, no matter how many battles he fought, he could never rewrite Kareem's legacy. But he could chip away at it, one hard foul, one mind game, one bitter memory at a time. If there was one player who mirrored Bill Laimbeer's bruising interior style, not with the same theatrics, but with the same results, it was Kevin McHale. Long, angular, and impossibly efficient, McHale was the silent killer of the Boston Celtics front line. Where Laimbeer was loud, confrontational, and in your face, McHale was calm, surgical, and quietly devastating. And maybe that's what made him so maddening, because Kevin McHale didn't need to throw punches or bait officials. He just punished you in the post, over and over and over again. The hatred between McHale and Laimbeer wasn't flashy like Bird versus Laimbeer or dramatic like Jordan versus the Pistons. It was slow burning, built through years of playoff wars, elbows, bruises, and cheap shots traded under the rim where the cameras rarely followed. It was less verbal, more visceral, the kind of hatred born from sheer exhaustion. Two men forced to wrestle each other in the trenches for over a decade. From 1985 to 1988, the Celtics and Pistons crossed paths in the postseason 3 times. Every series was brutal, every series went deep, and every series left scars. McHale averaged nearly 20 points per game in those series, while shooting at a staggering percentage, even with Laimbeer doing everything in his power to throw him off his rhythm. The Celtics offense ran through Larry Bird, sure, but McHale was the muscle behind the machine. His post moves were so technically sound that even Laimbeer's goonish tactics couldn't always stop them. Laimbeer hated that. He couldn't intimidate McHale, couldn't rattle him, couldn't drag him into a shoving match or a technical foul duel the way he could with other stars. McHale wasn't interested in theater, he was there to work. And when it came to physical play, McHale could dish it right back. Fans remember the 1984 clothesline on Kurt Rambies, a moment that cemented McHale's reputation as someone who could flip the switch from quiet assassin to unapologetic enforcer. That play became a turning point in that final series, and Laimbeer, watching it from afar, knew exactly what it meant. McHale didn't need to be dirty all the time, he just needed to be dirty when it mattered most. When the Pistons finally beat the Celtics in the 1988 Eastern Conference Finals, it wasn't just a symbolic victory. It was a personal one for Laimbeer. For years, Boston had been the standard. They had embarrassed Detroit in '85, edged them out in '87, and kept the Pistons stuck in the role of bridesmaid, and McHale, the relentless low-post nightmare, was a massive reason why. So when Detroit closed out Boston in 6 games, Laimbeer didn't hide his satisfaction. He walked off that court with a sneer, finally conquering the team and the player who'd haunted his playoff dreams for years. But McHale never gave him the satisfaction of a feud. He never barked, never swung, never bit on Laimbeer's provocations. That quiet defiance, it was more infuriating than any punch, and it wasn't just playoff games. In regular season meetings, the tone was no different. McHale once said, "When we played the Pistons, we knew what it was going to be. We were going to get hit, pushed, elbowed. That was their brand of basketball, and you had to match it." And McHale did, again and again. He didn't complain, he adapted. And that's what stung Laimbeer the most. Because McHale wasn't just good, he was unshakable. Every attempt Laimbeer made to bully him bounced off like rubber. Laimbeer, for all his fire, needed to draw you into chaos to win the psychological battle. But McHale, he walked through the fire and acted like it was a Sunday shoot-around. That kind of cold, quiet killer, it left no room for control. And that's why Laimbeer hated him. He couldn't beat him with antics, couldn't disrupt his timing, couldn't even get him to flinch. The final straw came with respect. Years later, Laimbeer was asked which players he respected most, and McHale's name was missing, not out of oversight, but choice, because respect was the one thing Laimbeer refused to give to the man who never acknowledged acknowledge the war. And for all the fouls, battles, and bruises they shared, Kevin McHale probably wouldn't say much about Laimbeer today. And that silence, that might be the thing Laimbeer hated most. If you think Laimbeer was the king of grudges, wait till you hear about Bill Russell. Because while he played with dignity, Russell never forgot a cheap shot or forgave a dirty elbow. From Wilt Chamberlain to Jerry West, his rivalries were legendary, and his resentment, cold, calculated, quietly brutal. Click here to watch Top 5 Players Bill Russell Hated and find out which legends crossed the greatest winner in basketball history and never made it back. Please do subscribe to the channel and like this video and comment your thoughts.